is here at Esselwan Books in Los Angeles, California, that we speak with celebrity chefs Pat and Gina Neely. They have a new book entitled Back Home with the Neelys. I'm Michael Reel, and this is ReelUrbanNews.com.
We've been in so many cars, in the back seat of so many cars for the last 3 or 4 weeks that, you know, coming from the South where you used to drive in your own car, I'm ready to drive my own. I don't want to look at the back of nobody's head.
So you all drive it home?
Yo, yeah.
Look, here's the thing. People always think that when you are a public figure,
Sure,
that you have all these amenities and people bowing down to you, but we do our own grocery shopping, we do everything ourselves. So, but that's what keeps you humble and keep you grounded.
Talk about the process, the decision process of gathering these 100 recipes for your new book, Back Home.
You know, I think the process was, Pat and I originally started with our first book, was really about introducing us, who we were, what the family stood for, what we felt about family, what family means, how family is so important. The second cookbook sort of matriculated on into celebration, like different holidays. We even created holidays like Sweet Tea and Sympathy, because some people are dying now, and how people often everybody flocks to you, the other funeral and everything, but when that week passes by and you still feeling that grief, no one is there for you. And kind of just saying maybe hold back and save a little something for that and just kind of let them know you're still thinking about them. So we tried to create new traditions for people to kind of create for themselves. So this third cookbook was more about, and we kind of collaborated about it and talked about it and said, what can we do differently? So we started thinking about, you know, where we came from, what's in our heart, what resonated with us. So I think just writing the third cookbook was more about a tribute to how we got started in the industry, because we're not culinary chefs, we're basically just cooks at grandma's knee in the loving old-fashioned way. So we just wanted to sort of, you know, put that message out there and know that you don't have to always go through that whole culinary process, but the love and the education is right there at your disposal. It's all about how you use it.
And then I think, you know, you reach a certain level to where people always ask you, when was the first time you were introduced to food? That's what was my biggest driving point to this topic. Because we always got that question, when were you first introduced to food? Was it when you guys got married? Was it when you opened your first restaurant as a kid? And Gina and I both looked at each other and we said, you know, it was grandmama. You know, grandmama in the kitchen cooking, you know, when we were knee-high, and she had a garden in her backyard, and she had fresh vegetables, and you know, she was the original housewife that sat home every day, got up, had a house coat on, granddaddy went out and worked, and she stayed there all day, and she cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner 3 squares a day. I mean, consistently. And we remembered those old good-fashioned meals. And stories that came with them. So when you look at Back Home with the Neelys, there's a couple of things that you will see that we hope that everyone will be able to resonate with. One is we did a bio on each one of our grandparents. So we talked about them, and not just about how they cooked, but how they looked and what they did, and the things that were so memorable for us. And then we talked about their recipes and what they were most famous for, the dishes that we love. And so then Gina and I came full circle and said, okay, now let's take these dishes and modernize them. Let's put our own spin on them. And our own spin was, one, for instance, is the blackened catfish, where my grandmother fried everything. She always fried catfish. So Gina and I says, well, people are not eating as much fried food now. Let's blacken it.
Well, and you know, and not to cut you off, it's so funny because look how we ate back then versus now. But my grandmother lived to almost 90, and people now are dying at 43.
Going eating healthy.
It's just a weird.
But you know what we said in the book was that they had true organic food. It came from their gardens in their backyard, or they on the weekend. My grandfather, I tell the story how he would go back to what he called the country. He moved to the city, but he would go back to the country, to the farmland that his cousins and brothers still lived on, and he would get the fresh vegetables and bring them back to the city, put them in what they called a deep freeze. You know, and they would have them there, and they would eat off of those for a week or two, and then he'd go back to the country. Well, now you go to the grocery store and you see organic. You don't know what the hell you get.
No.
You know, it
Right.
says
They
organic,
say
but
organic.
where's the proof that it's really organic?
Right.
They truly had organic food, and they lived into their 90s because two things happened. They had a lifestyle of being very active. They got up, they worked hard, and they didn't lay around all day and watch TV and stuff. Although my grandmother had As the World Turns was on,
Right.
she was dusting the floor and vacuuming the carpet up off of it. I mean,
Sure.
she worked her butt off. And my granddaddy went out and he worked hard all day, but they lived good, long, healthy lives, and they fried a lot of stuff and everything. So, you know, Gina and I are starting to have this perception of it's not what you eat and how you eat; it's the lifestyle.
It's the balance. It's
the
lifestyle.
balance
It's
of the
the balance,
lifestyle that
yeah.
you live that will dictate, you know, the healthy side of your life.
You know what's fascinating about this book? It looks like a coffee table cookbook. The
Right.
pictures are wonderful.
Thank you.
you.
My aunt, 94, she was like,
Isn't the photography amazing?
the
in it?
pictures look,
Yes.
they bring the food and the recipes to
to
life.
life.
You don't have to read the book.
Yeah.
Right.
I totally, and we were very pleased with that because sometimes it's hard to capture certain dishes, but that photographer was amazing. Just
But we're
very
also
eclectic.
like,
Good.
Gina and I, from each one of our cookbooks, and Down Home with the Neelys was a New York Times bestseller that we're super proud of.
Sure.
We wanted to create fantastic recipes, but at the same time, we want to give a story. Because you can get great recipes anywhere. You can go
Right.
online, you can go anywhere and get great recipes. And obviously, we're very proud of our recipes, but we also want to give a story that'll drive people back home, get them to thinking.
Sure.
Get them to thinking about, you know, old school stuff. And, oh, well, I grew up like that. You know, I'm just like the Neelys. And so a lot of the stories that we told were pretty much stories that we hope that really stick with, you know, the average American that's out there to say, I remember that. I can
And
remember
you
that.
know what? And that makes me think about when we were in Nashville, and that lady stood up and she said, "Just listening to you guys is just making me think about how my grandmother did, you know, all these things." So it's sort of stirring up the old memories, and hopefully they can use those. Oh, we don't want that.
Drop your diamonds.
No, it's not. It's,
You know how hard it hit the ground?
it's just not a little fun, a little funky, right?
Don't let her play with you.
Yeah.
That'll hit the ground awful hard.
Whatever. Yeah, but you know, it's basically what we're trying to do is just wake up people and just ring a bell and saying, you know, it's okay to be new school. You know,
Sure.
I understand the technology and all that, but you know, these old Southern roots and these old times are not to just be dispelled away. You can mix them up and bring a nice balance to it.
And that's important.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so important because
good
we've
balance.
gotten so away from it. And
Kids
our,
texting,
you
nobody's
know,
spending family time.
Gina and I are very passionate, although we people look at us as these amazing cooks,
Sure.
as we like to refer to ourselves. But we have such a big story to tell, and it's not just about hanging out in the kitchen, but it's
Right.
the fact that we've stayed together and known each other for almost 35 years. We married almost 20 years. We've raised two amazing daughters, and hopefully that, you know, we can inspire young couples and other people that it's so important to use food or whatever your passion is as a couple to bring your family together, keep your family together. I was just telling someone earlier today, because I was asking about the book, and I said my grandmother and my grandfather, as long as I can remember, and I may have even told the story in the book, I can't recall, slept in separate bedrooms for as long as I can remember.
Sure.
When I was a kid and would go visit them, he had his own bedroom, and Mama Rena had her own bedroom. She had her fine linen and comforter on. You could never get up on that comforter. She would have a fit if you even sat on that comforter. You know, pull that comforter back, boy. Don't you get up on my comforter. But they had separate bedrooms. But here was the thing. The constitution of marriage was so important as an example for their children and their grandchildren that I often thought as I got older, man, they couldn't stand and sleep together, but they wasn't going to get no divorce.
Right.
They stayed together as a couple because they were setting an example for their kids and their grandchildren that this is how we do. And when they went before God and said that until death do us part, they meant that. And they ended up staying together, but it was...
That was such a but you know what, and I hate to cut you off because that was such a generational time. That's
Right.
when family stayed together regardless.
Through thick and thin.
Through thick and thin, you know, you knew that your husband had a girlfriend across the street, and it was just sort of accepted.
Right.
Well, you know, of course, times have changed. You have women in corporate America. You know, the times are just so different now. And while I can't appreciate that story, it's just almost like you have to sort of come to that place where, do you really settle for that? Is that good enough? So and I know you and I've had this conversation over cocktails. We may have been drinking, probably didn't even make any sense with it. Because Pat and I try to really just kind of just bounce off each other, just different ideas and stuff like that. Just how we grew up versus how I grew up, because he grew up with his mother and father. I grew up in a single parent, but his dad died when he was 12. But I always found that just so weird how women were just so accepting and, I don't want to say meek, but submissive maybe can be a better
different
word.
time.
It's a very different
It
time.
was a different time, but it was a time that was a part of our history
and our heritage,
and our heritage
Absolutely.
that should be, regardless to how we've changed, because obviously a lot has changed in terms of our lifestyles and things, but it shouldn't be forgotten.
Accessibility.
And our kids should know and understand, regardless of how they decide to live their lives and everything. They should know that. And I think that it gets lost, whether it's the civil rights movement or the struggles that African Americans. You know, Gina and I just last week was in New York, and we were in a green room with Whoopi Goldberg. Greg Anthony played for UNLV, now sports commentator, played all his years in the NBA, and Sherry Shepard, and we were on The View. And one of the things that we talked about was we as African Americans have to really start to stick together. We have to share our ideals and our history and our heritage with the younger generation so that they can appreciate the position that they're in. And even from a culinary standpoint, you know, you should embrace the fact that your great-great-grandmother cooked great meals for your great-great-grandfather.
So really, this interview, and well, really this book, all of your books, and your TV show, and your, let's just say, media empire is really about family and the importance of tradition, especially as African Americans.
Absolutely.
So much more than just about the food.
Food is just a conduit.
It is. It's an avenue.
It was. I was going to say it was just the outlet to extend. It's the platform to open up the door for that. Absolutely.
You know, one of the things I was most proud of when we first started in television was that Gina made a strong stipulation with the network executives that we would be ourselves.
Right.
And when you watch our show and even through the book, you know, there's no script. We speak straight from the heart. And if it ever came a point to where we couldn't speak from the heart, then it's time to cut it. It's time to be done with it.
And you find the importance of that because out of all the shows we visited, like just on this media tour, how everybody has a teleprompter. Nobody free flows anymore. And for us, it's so weird to have a teleprompter because we're so accustomed to just free flowing, speaking from the heart. Because I find that is just the most authentic way, and people are more relatable to that. So I really think that was the natural draw for not just African Americans, but all Americans to understand and see a couple that was transparent and they could relate to that.
And that ability to speak from the heart through your food.
Yes.
Because
you know, food is just an extension of the love and the soul that it brings to you. That's all it is.
This is my last question.
No worries.
Don't get mad at me.
No worries. We're enjoying.
I was watching, wondering.
Yes, ma'am, baby. A cast iron skillet.
I dug this one out.
I see it.
Why is this so essential to cooking food?
Let me tell you.
And our heritage.
The cast iron skillet has been around forever. I can think of this when I was 3 years old, and there are steps to. At some people, there are steps to season it. You don't just buy this right out. You have to season it, put it on a baking plate, put oil in, and it takes a couple of steps to season it for the flavor to get in there. So no matter what you cook, that flavor seeps through into that food. But our little going joke was that you can also use this a couple ways.
I mean, my grandmother, my mother told me a story.
Come in at 2 o'clock if you want
my grandmother actually used it on my grandfather once for coming in too late. But you know, the thing about it was it was durable.
Yes, sir.
And think about the dishes that can be prepared in a cast iron skillet.
Yes.
Okay, so you can fry, whether it's catfish, fried chicken, or whatever. You can also make a fantastic cornbread.
Sure.
The hot water cornbread,
Oh,
or
yeah.
the plain cornbread, or whatever.
Right.
Then you can also use it for casseroles. You want to make a nice casserole, and you can take it and make your casserole and then put it in the oven. So that's not a skillet like, you go and buy most skillets. You can put them in the oven at 450
No, after
degrees.
3 weeks they're done.
But you can do and it lasts forever.
Right.
And whether people want to believe it or not, Gina and I have a cast iron skillet in our cupboard right now. We got all the new fancy pots. We even came out with our own pot and pan line about a year or two ago. But we still have that old cast iron skillet, and when I'm ready to do me some good catfish, a blackened catfish, or fried catfish, or whatever, I pull that cast iron skillet out because it ain't going nowhere. It lasts forever.
It's the real truth.
Pat and Gina Neely, Back Home with the Neelys, thank you for a wonderful opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has
Thank you
just been a
so
true
much.
treat.
Thank you so much for having us, man.